some pan-fried pork chops, and oven-roasted broccoli, and I whipped up some quick challah bread that will bake up in just a little bit. So let's start by getting our potatoes peeled so that we can get them boiling, because they're going to be the item on our menu tonight that's going to take the longest. So we're just going to give them a quick peel, then we're going to dice them up, cube them fairly small, about the size of an actual die, so that they will get nice and tender quick. If the larger you cut your potatoes, the longer it takes to cook them. So we're going to try for a little bit smaller ones, because this meal should be a pretty quick meal tonight. Nothing takes an exorbitant amount of time. So let's get these peeled up. I've got 5 pretty good sized russet potatoes here. So we're just going to take off all of the skin. Russet potatoes, I find, give you really light and fluffy mashed potatoes as compared to like gold potatoes, which gives you more of a sticky potato. So I love a good russet potato mashed potato. It reminds me of Thanksgiving. That's always what my mom made at Thanksgiving time, versus I feel like when you go to a restaurant, they're typically a starchier potato, like a gold potato. Okay. And then I always peel the skin off the russets because they're just not very good in mashed potatoes if you leave them on. A gold potato, you can leave them on. Red potatoes, you could leave the skin on. But russets are just really chewy. They don't get tender and break apart as easily. So you definitely want to peel them. Okay. One more to go. And last one down. I will say I've gotten pretty efficient at peeling over the years, but you gotta have a good peeler. My mom once, she was like so proud. She brought me this peeler that she had gotten in Germany, and she was like, "This is the best potato peeler ever." And I have to say, it is the worst potato peeler ever. I have it still like in my drawer. I never use it. I really feel like it's a left-handed potato peeler because it feels weird in my hand, and I can't peel with it at all. So I just like the good old cheapies classic. They work well. Tried and true, they say. Let's get rid of our potato skins. And then we're gonna dice these up, and I'm gonna pop them in my water. I already preheated my water up so that they can get a quick boil on, but that's not essential. It's not like pasta where you have to have the water boiling.
You have a question? Is it okay to use red potatoes for mashed potatoes?
You can use red potatoes for mashed potatoes, and those are ones that you can definitely keep the skins on. They're more tender. That's what you typically see in a lot of restaurants. So if you don't want to peel them, I think red potatoes are perfect for mashed potatoes. But if you like a skinless mashed potatoes, red potatoes are kind of a pain to peel because their skin is a lot thinner. So I would stick with one, like an easier peel one, if you like a skinless one. But no, they do make great mashed potatoes. I will say, I don't feel like there's really any potato that doesn't make a good mashed potato. It's just going to change your texture. Russets, they're great baking potatoes. They're a bit more fluffy. They're not as waxy, so you're going to have a fluffier mashed potatoes. But if you like that stickier, thicker mashed potato, like golds work well, red potatoes work well for that.
And do you use milk in your mashed potatoes?
Nope. I am a firm believer of cream and butter, no milk. If you're going to eat mashed potatoes, you're not doing it because you're on a diet, so you got to do the real deal. It just gives a so much better mashed potato. And that's why I think everybody always says, "Oh, your mashed potatoes are the best." But that's because I make them the way they should be, with cream and butter. Because, that's just what really shines in them. I think milk makes your potato too watery and doesn't have enough body to it. Okay, let's get these all down. Got one more left, and then we're gonna pop these in the water. And my knife is wanting to stick to them. Slice it here. And then I always try to cut my potatoes about the same size. With russet potatoes, the longer you cook them, they will start to disintegrate. So you won't get that with a gold potato. Gold potatoes are a bit waxier, they keep their form, which makes them great for soups, which russets aren't as great for. But as long as you kind of keep an eye on your sizing and make sure they're all about the same size, they'll cook up evenly and you won't lose a lot of it in the water. So we're gonna add these guys. And then I do not salt my water. I just leave my water as it is, and then I will just add the salt to my mashed potatoes as I go. I feel like potatoes are like sponges, and so you can salt them in the water, but I feel like you end up salting them just as much afterwards. So kind of cut out on any extra, sodium you put in there. I'm gonna give it a little bit of a stir. Right there. Okay. So we're gonna let those start kind of boiling up. And while we do that, let's prep our broccoli that's gonna go in our oven. So I'm gonna just pick up, I've got a big bag, but I always have to do a little trimming. I'm not gonna use all of these tonight, but we're gonna take about half of it. And I love to do a good oven roasted broccoli where I put kind of a garlic butter and Parmesan cheese on them. But I'm gonna go through and kind of trim off the ends so that we don't have a huge amount. And I will say, when you already get the pre-packaged broccoli, those ends tend to get dehydrated faster and are a little bit more chewy. So I always like to go through and give them a little chop. Let's see. So we'll just take those off and remove them, just because, once some, vegetables, when they're cut and they're out of the water, they really do get more fibrous. There we go. Looking for any other ones that look like they need a little trimming. Okay, and then we're just gonna cut some of these into, I can break them into smaller bits. You don't need to get rid of too much of the broccoli stalk. I think broccoli stalks are delicious. It's funny. I love the whole bit of broccoli in my family. They literally like the leaves of the broccoli, the little teeny things. And so the way my family, outside of me, so the normal person, the way they eat it is they like bite off all the leaves and they leave the little stump. And I'm just like, that's not how you eat broccoli. You gotta eat the whole thing. Okay, we've got our broccoli here. Put it on this baking sheet. We'll have it start to get ready. And then we're gonna start melting up our butter. We'll add a little bit of garlic to it to get that nice flavor in it. Okay. Got a little teeny tiny saucepan right here. So we're gonna get that starting to melt up. I'm gonna just do about like 2 tablespoons of butter. You just want enough to coat it. A lot of it will run down on the pan, but if you skimp on it, you're not gonna get enough coating on it, and then you won't have as good broccoli. So we're gonna get that to start melting. Let me grab my jar and a spoon. And I'm gonna put about a tablespoon or so into my butter. And we're gonna just let it kind of infuse in the butter. I'm gonna put it right on top so it slowly starts to melt first. Because if you have that garlic down there, that will crisp up a little too fast. Okay. Let me get it's puffed up well. I made this like 30 minutes ago. I prepped it up, maybe 35. So this is my quick challah bread. The trick is, if you want a quick bread that's gonna bake up fast, I use a lot of extra yeast. So this has 2 tablespoons of yeast in it to get a quick rise, so you kind of can skip out that rise and wait. So it's a great way to make delicious yeast bread in less than an hour. And look how beautiful. It's just gorgeous. Okay. Let's get our egg. We're gonna take 1 egg and we're going to beat it up with about a tablespoon of water, and then we're gonna brush it over our challah here. didn't crack that hard enough. I'm gonna grab a fork. Let's grab a smidge bit of water. You just need a little bit of water, about a tablespoon more. And that's just kind of to dilute out your egg wash so it doesn't curdle on your bread. If you leave it a straight up egg, what will happen is it's gonna curdle a little bit and it will be like a cooked egg on it versus a nice shiny skin. So we're gonna mix this up. There we go. And then I'm actually gonna check out real quick before we brush that on. You can hear my garlic starting to simmer, so I'm gonna give this a little stir. I'm gonna let the garlic infuse there. I'm gonna turn mine down to the lowest setting, so it's like on a 1 out of 10, and we're just gonna let that garlic soak in that butter because I want it to come out of the flavor. I don't want to get too crispy. Let's get my little pastry brush here. So just kind of a glazer. And we're just gonna take our little egg wash and we're gonna brush it over our whole loaf here. Now you wanna make sure you get every nook and cranny so that it gets the shine on there. And then we're gonna go pop this in the oven. And the beauty of this bread is this takes only about 13 minutes to cook. It cooks up really fast, but it is such a soft and fluffy bread. And so it cooks up and then you just let it sit for a few minutes before you rip into it to let the steam escape. But it is a gorgeous loaf. Super simple too. There we go. And this one is, I should have put it in my even bigger sheet pan because when I first did the roll, it was like here to here and it has just exploded. Okay, let's get this guy going in there. So this is I call it like a 1 hour, I missed a spot. I want to do a quick little brush. I always say if you miss a spot, what happens is it's not going to get shiny right there, and you want it to be shiny all over.
You have a question? Do you always eat so late for dinner?
Yeah, we're pretty late eaters. We eat lunch late. We're just, during the school year, it's sports that keep us up late, and I think we just kind of stick to that schedule during the summer. I don't have any sports to say that was the reason why we were late today, but we just are used to eating at like 8:45-ish, 9 o'clock. It's just what we always do. I think part of it is because during the school year when all of our kids' sports are up and going, I typically leave the house around 4:45 and I don't get home until 7:45, so dinner can't happen until later, and I'm big about making home-cooked meals.
You have a question. Do you have the recipe up for the challah bread?
I think we do have the recipe up. I think, yes, so we gave that as a freebie to everyone, I believe. So I think we posted it a month or so ago. I'm gonna add in about a half a teaspoon of garlic salt. So garlic and more garlic. We're gonna mix it up. And then we've got this nice little herby butter. We're gonna pour it over our broccoli. We wanna really get it kind of coated with all the lovely flavors. And then we're gonna coat it, with some Parmesan, but we're first gonna give it a nice little kind of mix around, make sure we get it all coated. That's why I like to kind of keep the broccoli right next to each other. And this just gives the broccoli such a great flavor. I will say my husband was never the biggest fan of broccoli, but he said this way is like his favorite way to eat broccoli. Okay, Parmesan, did I not grab it? Let me grab my Parmesan. My big bowl of shredded Parmesan. I can't live without it. I feel like I go through one of these entirely way too fast. But Costco, you gotta love Costco. But it's just nice shaved Parmesan cheese. And we'll pop this in a few minutes, and they will get nice and it will melt and kind of crisp up over the broccoli. And the broccoli, you don't need to blanch it or do anything. The roasting will steam roast it, and the butter on it keeps it so it kind of steams up nicely as well, but gets that tender crunch to it. So we'll pop this in a minute or two. Let's get our pork chop seasoning here. We've got these kind of thick, about 1-inch pork chops, boneless. We're gonna season them up with a little bit of Dale seasoning, onion powder, and Montreal steak spice. So Dale's, if you've never used it, it's kind of like a soy sauce based seasoning. It's a lot like a Worcestershire, but without the vinegar. So we're gonna add a little bit over each one. And then I'm gonna kind of rub it. So we'll give it a nice little rub. You want to coat it up because you want these flavors to kind of soak in nicely. But it is a lovely flavor, but it does have a soy sauce base to it. Forgot to get there. And we're gonna shake a little bit of onion powder over it. This is gonna give it a bit more of a savory kind of cut through. And then we're gonna do our Montreal steak thing, which has like a peppery, I will say it's like a kind of a peppery and seasoned salt flavor to it. But it's nice, especially with pork chops. I think it gives you a zing. This will give you a bit of a kick to your pork chop. And then we're gonna flip it over. We're gonna do the exact same thing on the other side. I always start with my liquid first to let it soak in, and then I allow my dry rubs to sit on top. Okay. I'm trying to be careful not to pour too much of it on. I will say, I wish it had like a little hole spout. There we go. Perfect. So we're just gonna do a nice little coating over it. I will say in cooking, don't be afraid to get dirty. It's gonna give you the best taste. There we go. So we're gonna do a little bit of onion powder over this. So onion powder is really just, you know, dehydrated onions that have been pureed into a fine powder. So they'll give you a really nice savory flavor without the texture of an onion. And then we're gonna do our little Montreal steak seasoning.
You had a question? Which pork chop is better, with or without the bone?
Honestly, I prefer the bone in, but my family says they're really hard to eat because the bone is hard to cut around. So you get more meat out of a boneless one, but I think the bone in is more tender and cooks up a little bit nicer. But you know, I feel like these are much easier and more convenient to eat. I feel like you get less waste on these. But I do like a really thick bone-in ones. Sometimes Costco will sell the really thick ones, or Publix, and they're just perfect. Most of the time, the problem with the boneless ones are they're too thin. These were a decent size, so I was, you know, kind of happy with them. But sometimes you get them and they're like tiny, tiny, and they're not good. The bone-in, when I get the really thick ones, what I do is I sear them off in a pan, and then I finish them off in the oven to cook them all the way through. All right, we're gonna put about, I wanna say 2 tablespoons, well, a tablespoon and a half of olive oil in my pan here. We're gonna let it start heating up, and then we'll cook our first batch of broccoli. Let me check my potatoes here. We're gonna see how they're cooking.
And you have a question, how was lunch?
Excellent. It was nice to have a kind of a refreshing salad. Of course, I was talking to my husband how a fried chicken salad, these need about 2 more minutes, is one of my favorite things to eat. I think it was just something I always had growing up with ranch dressing, so it hit the spot. Let's put our broccoli in. We can take a peek at our challah, see how it is cooking up, and we'll let these start roasting for it. So we're about halfway done with the cook time on our challah. And as you can see, it is a beast, and it is cooking gorgeous. So we're gonna add that up there. On that, and I am cooking that at 400 degrees. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but the challah is at 400. I've slid the broccoli right under it. We'll take the challah out and we'll let the broccoli cook a little bit longer, but let's get our pork chops in. Should be just about hot here. Let me give a little sizzle test. My sizzle test consists of a little drop of water. You see it didn't quite boil up yet, so we want it to get a little bit hotter. You always want to start searing your meat off in a hot pan. So the way I do it is I put my oil in and then I do a drop of water. If it doesn't sizzle, let it heat. Because if you don't, if you put it in while it's cold or just a little bit warm or a little bit hot, you won't get that crisp sear on it, and the meat will cool the pan down. And so you want it to be plenty hot in order for it to get that good, like that good sear on it. I'm gonna put my warmer on my oven so that I can, when we're done with our first batch of pork chops, I'll just pop them in there to keep them warm. Okay, I can see those drops of water are bouncing, so let me check. It should be good now. There we go. You can see we've got much more, that pop coming up. We've got a nice hot oil. So I'm gonna start with my thickest ones first because they're the ones that will continue to cook more once you take them out. So I want them to have that longest resting time. Let's see, I'm trying to see which one. This guy's thick. There we go. We're gonna let them start to sizzle up and cook. I'm gonna cook them over about a 6 right now. I might turn it down a little bit when we're kind of getting closer. Let me check my potatoes here, see how we're cooking. I'll know when my potatoes are ready to mash up when I find a big one, and then my fork can go all the way through it. Of course, it's not wanting to stay right here. So, see? Now my fork just goes through it effortlessly. That lets me know that they are ready. I'm gonna reserve a little bit of this liquid because I'm gonna make what I call a sawmill gravy. And that is essentially, I'm gonna turn this off, is a gravy made from the drippings of our pork chops in the pan. A little bit of flour, a little bit of cream, and a little bit of chicken broth. And I'm just gonna use my starchy water for my potatoes and chicken bouillon for that broth. That starchiness will add a little bit of texture to our gravy, help thicken it up as well. There we go, we don't need much. I'm just gonna grab a little over a cup, but I probably will only use a cup. Let me grab my finger. Now, if you ever have a problem of getting lumpy potatoes, it's because your potato is not cooked all the way through. So it's really important to have them kind of cut up at the same time. And I always say, check for the biggest potato. If your fork goes through it easily, then the rest will go through. Otherwise, you'll get those chunks in it, and that's because the potato isn't soft enough. So we're gonna do a quick strain. And then mine are gonna go right back in here. Because this is a stainless steel pot, I can whip my mashed potatoes right up in here without transferring to another bowl, which is one thing I love about it. I love the all-clad set. Don't whip your mashed potatoes in a non-stick pot if you have one. It will just ruin it. But you can do it if there's a stainless steel. So we're gonna add in our butter. 1 whole stick, you're gonna want it. It'll make it nice and rich. And again, these are gonna be mashed potatoes for about 8 people. So you'll have, the butter goes a long way for it. Let's check on our, see if these are ready. Beautiful. I'm gonna turn them down to about a 6 now. We've got this nice, lovely sear on it. That's from making sure our pan was nice and hot when we started. That crust is just the best part. Okay. I've got my butter in here. I'm gonna grab a trivet to place this on because I'm gonna need it a little bit closer to whip up. I don't whip it right away. So I put my butter in here. I buried it inside my potatoes because I want it to melt some. If you've ever tried to whip up mashed potatoes with cold butter in there and the butter will just spin around, give it a second to melt up. Then we'll add our cream and our salt in. I'm gonna grab my chicken bouillon out of the fridge. Where are you? This is always hiding in here. I know I had one just in, oh, you know what? I used it up last time. Gotta go to my pantry. I always took it. I'm like, oh, it's over here. Yep, apparently, I did not buy more chicken bouillon. Here's the thing, I'll use some vegetable bouillon. It won't be the end of the deal. Let me see it. Okay, so see, we've got our butter nice and melted here. It's starting to go through. I'm gonna break it up just a smidge, mix it around. I really want it to melt up first before we start whipping it. Otherwise, you'll get like parts of the butter that don't melt.
You have a question? What do you season the pork chops with?
The pork chops, I use Dale seasonings, onion powder, and Montreal steak seasoning. And add in a little bit of our cream. We're gonna start with about 1/4 of a cup. And now our challah bread is ready to come out. So let's go grab that out of the oven. And while we're grabbing that, I'm gonna grab my vegetable bouillon. We'll use that for my beef base here, or my meat base. Not as good as chicken, but it will work. Look at that beautiful challah bread. You see how it's just got this lovely golden brown texture. I'm gonna put my broccoli up. That golden brown color is from that egg wash. It gives it that shine and that brownness. Otherwise, it would be a very pale looking loaf. If you notice where it's kind of burst out how pale it is, that would be the color of if you didn't do the egg wash. The egg wash gives you the golden brown without having to bake it so much that it gets overcooked inside. But it is, I will say, this is my show me loaf. It's just so pretty and delicious and something you can whip up really quick because it doesn't need, like the extra yeast that you use makes it rise really, really fast. Okay, let's add in, we're gonna do about 1 teaspoon of salt. And we're gonna whip these guys up. I'll whip them in 2 stages. I always like to whip them, let them rest, and then whip some more. There we go. And so we've got the first round of whipping done. And the reason I do this is it typically always needs a little bit more either butter or cream, and I do it based on how it looks. Okay, our pork chops are just about...
Now on the pork chops, you don't cook them a certain time. You cook them until firmness?
Yes, the firmness gives you the idea of when they're done. So like this guy is done because like when I push down, he doesn't have as much of a bounce. But look at this guy. You see how he moves a lot? That means they're not quite done. But this guy doesn't move. So this one is good. And I will say, when you remove your pork chops from, or your meat from here, they're gonna cook some more because they're gonna be resting. So we're gonna add this guy in here. I'm gonna turn my up. We've got one more going. And I will say, it's better to check and remove them out before you do it because you don't want them to get overcooked. Pork is one of those things that you overcook all the way. If you have really thick pork chops, just sear them off and finish them in the oven at around 350, 400. That's gonna give you a juicy and tender one. If you try to overcook it on the pan, it will leach out all the lovely liquid and give you just a dried out pork. Okay, we got my starchy potato liquid right here. We're gonna add in a spoonful. This is vegetable bouillon. Chicken bouillon works really great for this as well, or even sauteed mushroom bouillon or onion bouillon works well with this. So we're gonna mix it up. And our gravy that we're gonna make is gonna be a mixture of this vegetable broth and cream and flour that we'll do in the drippings of our pork chops. There we go. Okay. We've got that mixed up nicely. Let's check on you guys. These are starting to firm up. I can tell already. I'm going to slide in another one right over here to start cooking. Now and here. So I'm looking at my potatoes right here, and to me, when I look at them, they're telling me that they don't have enough cream in them because they are broken and they're not smooth. So I'm gonna add a little bit more cream. You never know exactly how much cream you're gonna need because it really just depends on how starchy those potatoes are and how much has leaked out in the water when you were boiling. So I'm gonna start with about another 2 or so tablespoons. We'll whip it up and then we'll give it a test taste.
I do have a question. Do you plan your menu from week to week?
That is the biggest question I get asked. I am terrible about meal planning. I rarely meal plan. I just kind of go to the grocery store, see what looks great, and I buy it from there. I probably should get better about meal planning, but I just buy a bunch of stuff and then what do I feel like making? Just a teensy bit more cream. And then a pinch more salt. And I will say your potatoes are going to be, there's no just foolproof. It's gonna be how they look, how they feel, and how they mix is when you're gonna know exactly when it's perfect. There we go. So these are what I figure perfect ones. They're nice and fluffy and smooth and not overly dense. I like mine a bit smoother, softer. Okay, these pork chops, these two are definitely done. Let's see, flip these over. This one's just about, turn it. Let's get our next two on. And we'll be able to make our gravy with our drippings here. That should be good. So I'm gonna put this batch in my oven to keep warm right down here. And then let's go grab our broccoli out of the oven, because it should be just about done. You don't want to overcook it because you don't want it to go to mush. I typically like to take it out when it has a nice vibrant green and the cheese is melted. So you can see our cheese is melted, and you can see that the broccoli is a brighter green. You know, fresh broccoli is typically a bit paler, and as it's been cooked, it turns brighter and brighter, which is why, like frozen broccoli, it's been blanched before it's been frozen, is so bright green in color. This is where you want it. You want it to get nice and bright. That way it is nice and tender and crisp, but not mushy. If it starts to turn like a yellowish brown, that's when you've overcooked it and it's gonna be mushy. There we go. These two are just about done. We grab this out of the way, and then we're gonna whip up our gravy, which takes about no time. Let me grab my little flour over here.
Hey, you have a question? Are the kids good eaters?
Well, depends what kid. My boys are excellent eaters, and my oldest daughter is getting to be much better at eating. She used to be picky, but my one daughter, my sweet Evie, has always been my pickiest eater. And she also has the weirdest taste buds. Like, she loves fresh lemons and limes, wasabi almonds. I mean, her favorite thing, she loves a salad. But potatoes, absolutely hates any form of potato besides salt and vinegar potato chips. So she loves pickles. She has these extremes in her eating. And I really think it was because when she was born, she didn't know how to eat. And so she was on a feeding tube for about 6 months. and could have nothing orally during that time because she also had really bad reflux on top of it. So she had a feeding tube that went into her, it bypassed her stomach and straight into her jejunum. And so I feel like she didn't get any good like taste of mellow foods, and so all she likes are these extremes. Okay, these two are done. And then, like these are just about done. We'll let them cook up. And then we'll pop these in. We have our pork chops right here. For those of you who don't know, a lot of people don't realize this. This is not blood. People think that when they see the red juices come out of it, they think, oh, it's blood. It is called myoglobin, I believe, which is a protein that it comes from the juices of the thing. So it's actually delicious, and it's a sign of the proteins coming out, meaning you have a really juicy thing. It's not blood. I always sit there, people don't realize when animals are slaughtered, they're actually drained of their blood. So that is actually the protein from when you're cooking it and it breaks down. When you overcook it is when you don't have that left over because it's been cooked off. These are just about done. I'm gonna start adding in, we're gonna add a little bit of, I'm gonna add a little bit of broth in here and start kind of bringing up some of these flavors. We'll steam this out just a little bit. I'm gonna deglaze a little of the pan so that it's not all stuffed full of seasonings when I add my flour and butter in. Okay, here we go. We're gonna add a smidge more. It's how quickly, when your pan's so hot, how quickly it evaporates. So I'm just gonna use my spatula while those are cooking up and just scrape the bottom of it. That way I'll have a good base for my gravy.
You have a question about what temperature are you cooking?
This is, right now I've got my stove, it's set at about a 6, which is going to be probably around 350 if you were to take a temperature of cooking something. Okay, I'm gonna pop these over in my hotter oven over there and let them sit, and then we'll make our gravy. Okay.
And what kind of pan are you using?
This is a Hexclad 12-inch frying pan. So I absolutely love this frying pan. Hexclad is a truly non-stick surface. It works really well. I'm gonna add a little bit of this, degrease it. I have this in my Amazon storefront if you wanna check it out. These are, I have to say, my favorite pans. I've had them for a little over 2 years, and out of all the, I wanna say the, non-stick pans that I've used, these ones have held up to my use. I'm pretty, I guess, not gentle on my pans in the kitchen, and I typically end up always scratching some. These have not. These have held up. Okay, we've got our butter here. Next, we're gonna have our base of our sawmill gravy, which we're gonna use. We'll add a little bit of flour in here. I'm gonna turn it down really low now. We're gonna mix in, you don't need a lot of flour. A lot of flour will hold your gravy together. So we're just start with about a half a tablespoon. I'm gonna mix it and then I'll see how much more I need to add. Okay, that should be good. And then we're gonna add in our broth, little by little, to kind of thicken it up, and then we're gonna add in some cream at the very end. Our dog's got a hairball. Those little cabbies got those little short snouts. There we go. You can see how it's thickening up so nicely. We're gonna give our last bit in there and kind of mix it with your whisk. Now I'm using a plastic coated whisk because even though Hexclad says they're completely indestructible, I still don't trust them. Instead of using a metal whisk, I'm gonna use the plastic whisk just to keep them safe and protected. There we go. And get don't get a plastic whisk, get a silicone whisk. Because silicone is heat rated up to I wanna say 600, 700 degrees. So it is a good one to use with cooking because you don't have to worry about it leaching chemicals or anything like that. So this is called sawmill gravy, and it gets the name because the drippings in your gravy look like sawdust that has gotten wet. So it's why it's called sawmill gravy, but it's delicious and it'll be great over our pork chops. I'm gonna taste it, see if we need to add anything else to it. Excellent. And it picks up all of those flavors from what you've cooked it in. So our gravy's done. I'm gonna grab our pork chops that have been warm in our nice hot oven over here. And we are ready to serve up dinner. Let me grab a plate here. We're gonna serve up. Okay. Get everything situated. Got my mashed potatoes. Got my spoon. We'll use the ladle for the gravy. And I gotta get a spatula for the broccoli. Okay. Let's start. We can put, this one looks delicious. We've got our pork chop. And then we're going to do a nice serving of our creamy mashed potatoes. Can't beat that. Our Parmesan and garlic broccoli. And then I love to do my gravy over both the mashed potatoes and the pork chops. It just gives you so much more flavor. And then of course, we'll break into our nice look at this challah. It's so soft and spongy. So we have a nice big piece of our challah bread for dinner tonight. So pretty quick and easy meal to whip up on a weeknight. Well guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making, and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to the link at our page, check out, type in the name of what we cooked, and then watch it again and cook along with me at home. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront on our profile page, so any of the cool gadgets you saw, I've got my pan in there, I've got my hand mixer in there, I've got all my things in there, my pans or whatnot in there for you to check out as well. But guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.